Hey, what's up, guys, and welcome to the Underdog Playoff Best Ball show. And I have a team that I believe we can draft late that can help us advance our Baltimore and San Francisco guys to the second round. And I'll get into it after this.
There is a ton of value in current Underdog Playoff Best Ball ADP. Elite offenses like the Bills are easy to stack. Take advantage of uncertainty and start drafting now. Use the promo code SEEK for up to a $100 match on your first deposit. And subscribe to Heat Seeker Sports on YouTube for Underdog strategy and drafting shows.
Hey, what's up, guys? Simon Edwards at Pumacom here with Heat Seeker Sports, and you're watching the Underdog Playoff Best Ball show. And I have a team that I think we can draft super late in these drafts that's going to help us get through the round one with our San Francisco and Baltimore guys who are going to put up no points in round one. But there's a high upside team that I think is going to make it into the playoffs. I think they're going to win a divisional game this weekend and make it into the playoffs and set themselves up and set us up with an opportunity to draft them late, get that high upside, and get those San Francisco and Baltimore guys through. But I'll talk about that in a minute. Before I get into that, hit the like button. Looking for 15 likes. I put out a shorter video. And also subscribe to the YouTube page. I'm at 340. I'm looking for 400 by the end of the playoffs. And we're getting really close. We're a week away from the playoffs right now. So we have a bunch of time to get there. And they're going to be doing these playoff best ball contests throughout the playoffs. And I'll be doing my showdown shows, game script throughout the playoffs as well. So help me get to 400 subscribers. And on top of that, make sure to sign up for an Underdog account because I'm about to do a draft here. Yesterday, my draft wasn't happy with it, so I wanted to get another draft in before I have some guests on. I'm going to have Spread a Stare on tomorrow, and I believe I'm having Bob Gomes on Thursday. So I'm going to be doing a bunch of these shows now that we're in the home stretch towards the playoffs. We got about a week and a half left. Week 18 is coming up this week. We got a lot of playoff implications this week, and I haven't gone super heavy with my drafting yet because there's a lot more uncertainty than we normally see, but I am finding value, and I've done well with projecting which teams will make it in the playoffs. We got the Rams in there. We got the Dolphins in there, and working on Buffalo, and it's a crazy situation where Pittsburgh could potentially get in there over Buffalo, but that's where we're at right now. So subscribe, sign up for Underdog, and get that matching bonus when you use the promo code SEEK, SEEK. Use that code, and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit when you open up a new account with Underdog. You're going to want to do that. You're going to want to start getting in on these drafts now, because the value is not going to be there for forever. And next week we're going to be drafting with the same information that everybody else has. We're going to all know who's going to make it into the playoffs. And at that point, you're just kind of trying to get different with how far these teams will get in the playoffs. So right now we have an opportunity to draft versus uncertainty, which is the best time to be drafting in these. So promo code SEEK. And send me a message on Twitter letting me know that you signed up using that promo code, and I will send you some rankings because I'm going to be doing some playoff best ball rankings this week, and I'll have those out to people who sign up for Underdog using that promo code SEEK. So let's get into it here. Going to share with you my thoughts on the teams that are going to advance to the playoffs. And this is going to be important because this is where we can get a little bit different with how we're drafting. If you can visualize the matchups in the playoffs, then you can visualize which teams will advance in the playoffs. And this is an exercise that I do every year, and it's helped me have a lot of success because I not only visualize who's going to make it into the playoffs, I take a visual spreadsheet look at the matchups themselves, just like I do every week when I, give you guys winners on the cheap stack show or these game script shows or whatever. We project the game script, and I've had a lot of success doing that, and I've had a lot of success doing this the past couple years with playoff best ball as well. Came up with Cincinnati versus San Francisco 2 years ago. It ended up being Cincinnati versus the Rams a couple years ago. And then last year, I ended up projecting, Cincinnati versus San Francisco. And, San Francisco got that cheap out when Philadelphia won when Brock Purdy got injured and they had no quarterback to play with. But also Cincinnati had a very close call, almost making it in over the Chiefs, but they obviously did not. But I had enough Chiefs and Eagles to make a few teams into the finals anyways. And that's really what you're trying to do here is make a few of these teams into the finals. But in order to do that, you need to be able to project who's going to make it to the Super Bowl, because otherwise you're playing with no players in the Super Bowl, which isn't going to help you at all. So let's take a look at the landscape as it is. We'll take a look at Week 18. And I am using the Pro Football Network NFL Playoff Predictor for my tool to help me see the scenarios. If you look at my show from the other day, I broke down a lot of the different playoff scenarios, so I won't get into that again. I'm just going to do an exercise where I go through the entire playoffs to the Super Bowl today and kind of give you guys what I'm thinking on some of these matchups. So I am projecting Pittsburgh to beat Baltimore. I think Baltimore is going to rest their starters this week. Now, one key thing to remember with Baltimore this week is that Odell Beckham has a whole bunch of lofty numbers that he needs to put up in order to obtain a huge $1 million plus bonus this week. So Odell Beckham will be highly incentivized to have a huge game if he does play and if they let him play this week. So keep that in mind with Baltimore. That is one thing that can help Baltimore actually beat Pittsburgh this week. Beckham has a bunch of incentives to get bonuses this week. So I'm not quite sure. We got to keep an eye on the beat reporters, keep an eye on the NFL reports and everything like that. Let's see what they're going to do with Beckham this week and see if they're going to give him an opportunity to get all those bonuses. Houston versus Indy. I got Houston. I think Houston's the better team. I know they're playing in Indy, but I think Indy's been playing above their skis this year, and I think Houston is a legit good team, and they are just looking good. They got brand new coaches in there. I know Indy does too. I like Indy's coaches as well, but I would take CJ Stroud over Gardner Minshew any day of the week, even when I think they have a relatively even coaching edge there between these two teams. I take Houston. Jacksonville, I think, can handle Tennessee, although DeAndre Hopkins has himself a bonus that he's trying to obtain. So DeAndre Hopkins is a guy who should get decent work in this Tennessee game. And if he goes off, then that's going to put Jacksonville in jeopardy. We still don't know the status of Trevor Lawrence this week, but I think that they will handle Tennessee. So for now, I have Jacksonville over Tennessee. Keep an eye on the injury news for Trevor Lawrence and keep an eye on just Tennessee in general. I think Levis is going to play last time I checked. So if Levis plays, that'll set up DeAndre Hopkins to potentially have a big game, because I'm guessing they're going to be throwing it to him the whole time just to get him those bonuses, but also to play a spoiler to a division rival in Jacksonville. This game doesn't matter. Cleveland versus Cincy doesn't matter. I got Cincy winning because I think Cleveland's going to rest their starters for the most part. This is a significant game because if New Orleans needs to win to have a chance to get in the playoffs. They need some other help to get in there, and so does Atlanta. Atlanta could potentially get in the playoffs too, so this is an important game. You can look at my show yesterday to find out exactly some of those scenarios. I didn't cover it very clearly because there's so much stuff going on in week 18, but you can get an idea from watching that show. Tampa Bay, I think, is going to beat Carolina. They need this win in order to clinch that spot as the champions of the NFC South. They blew it the other day. They should have had it already, but they blew it, and they didn't clinch it in week 17. So they have an opportunity to do it against an easy matchup against Carolina, but they're also division rivals with nothing to lose. So that is always dangerous. So never underestimate division opponents who have nothing to lose in week 18. They can always play the spoiler. Minnesota, I got Detroit beating Minnesota, although I think Detroit is going to, I take that back. I don't think they're going to rest their starters because they're still in play for the number 2 seed. So Detroit, I think they're going to go hard this week, potentially. Green Bay needs to win this game in order to get a playoff spot. Now, one narrative here, Chicago would love to spoil Green Bay's playoff opportunities due to all the history of Chicago and Green Bay. We had Aaron Rodgers screaming to the crowd about how, he owns them or Green Bay owns Chicago. So Chicago would love nothing more than to knock Green Bay out of the playoffs. And, they could potentially do it this week. Seattle plays Arizona, another divisional game. Arizona's been playing better with Kyler Murray recently, and they not knocked off the Eagles, but they beat the Eagles last week and put them in the 5 seed and, set up Dallas for that number 2 seed. Dallas is in the steering wheel, right? Dallas is steering their own destiny, whatever you want to call it, this week, and they could potentially clinch it with a win. The Rams are a team that I've been calling for a few weeks now. They made it into the playoffs last week. They clinched it. I think San Francisco is going to rest their starters, which sets up the Rams to win this game. And it's going to be an important, relatively important game because it's going to get them the 6th seed and set them up to face off against Detroit, which I think is a winnable game for the Rams. I think the Rams have, they have a somewhat of a coaching edge. I won't call it an all-out coaching edge because I like Dan Campbell, but the Rams have experience in the playoffs, and experience in the playoffs is huge. We've seen it before where, like these teams that have a lot of playoff experience and good coaching can knock off these teams that, played well all season long, and then they get in the playoffs. They don't have a lot of experience in the playoffs, and they end up getting knocked out in the first round. That, I think, is a scenario with Detroit in the playoffs in round 1. So keep that in mind. And now, these playoff spots aren't even locked in. These are just what I'm projecting. So I'm projecting this matchup. It could be a different matchup, but this is what I'm projecting right now, and this is what I'm going to be drafting my playoff best ball based on, because you got to have a projection. You got to take some stands. Your stands might be different than mine. Take your stands. Use this playoff predictor to find out what your matchups are going to be, and then do your usual process for picking apart these matchups and figuring out the weaknesses and the strengths of each matchup and which teams you think can win in those matchups and advance to the next round. Just do the same thing. I'm just going to show you the process. You don't have to go with the same picks. It's just a process thing. Now, I have Philadelphia over the Giants. I think that should be a relatively easy game, but we've seen Philadelphia recently. They need to get their shit together this week in order to, get some kind of a momentum going into the playoffs. They need to come out and stomp the Giants in order for them to build up their confidence heading into the playoffs. I think that's a key thing with the Eagles this week. And I'm assuming that they won't rest their starters because they're still playing for that number 2 seed, and they can still potentially win that if Dallas loses, as you can see. So Eagles are going all out this week. Look for them to stomp the Giants. I think Dallas has a more difficult matchup against Washington. Washington has a worse record than the Giants, but Washington has a higher powered offense. And, they are playing at home, and Dallas has not done as well on the road. Dallas has won some games that they should, or lost some games that they should have won on the road this year. And they are vulnerable to a division opponent with a high-powered offense like Washington can be when they're clicking on all cylinders. So dangerous game for Dallas, but shouldn't have a problem winning against Washington and advancing. Kansas City, this game doesn't matter. I would guess that Kansas City probably rests their starters or at least for half the game, unless they're looking for some momentum too. Denver, Las Vegas doesn't matter. Buffalo, Miami is the biggest game of the week. This is a significant game because it's going to decide a few things. Like Buffalo needs this win, not just to win the NFC or the AFC East. They need this win to get into the playoffs. Because if they lose, then there's ways that they could get eliminated and be done for the year. Buffalo has put themselves in a position where they need to win in week 18 to secure a playoff spot. If they lose, you can see what happens. Pittsburgh would get in under my projections. If Baltimore wins, Buffalo would get in. So they would need Pittsburgh to lose. And for they would need, if they lose, they need Pittsburgh to lose. And I don't think Pittsburgh's going to necessarily lose this week unless Beckham, ends up having that monster game and, helps Baltimore beat Pittsburgh. But I don't really think that's going to happen. That might be wishful thinking because I have a pretty big investment in Buffalo for playoff best ball. And I'm hoping that they actually win because I think if they get in the playoffs, they're going to be dangerous. Because if they get in by beating Miami, look at who I'm projecting for their first week matchup. I'm projecting them to face the Houston Texans, which is a game where you look at the matchup that Buffalo wins, and they'd be playing at home in Buffalo on top of that. I think Buffalo wins that matchup. With Miami versus Kansas City, I think that this is a game that Miami can win. I think that Miami, their strong running game, is a weakness on Kansas City's defense. And I think that Miami has many different ways to attack, but their running game can exploit that weak spot in Kansas City's defense. And if Kansas City decides to shift their attention to the running game, then that's going to leave Miami open to, pitch and catch to Tyreek and Jalen Waddle. And all that speed on Miami is going to be trouble for Kansas City. And the only thing that would be dangerous for that is Tua is horrible under pressure, and Kansas City's ability to generate pressure is going to be trouble for Tua. But I think that run game of Miami is going to be the differentiator because Miami has a good defense as well, and Kansas City doesn't have the weapons to exploit that defense. And the only thing that they have going for them is Bradley Chubb's ACL, which is why these injuries suck, because Bradley Chubb would be huge in this matchup, helping to, just neutralize that offense of Kansas City and prevent them from being able to put up enough points to beat Miami with a strong run game matchup. So that would be an interesting matchup. I got Miami over Kansas City in that matchup. I think Miami can beat them. Cleveland versus Jacksonville. You look at the matchup. Cleveland has a very strong defense. Jacksonville has a very weak defense. Cleveland has the ability to make games a shootout when the defense isn't working. So Kansas City has offense and defense. Jacksonville barely has offense. Jacksonville's offense has been subpar throughout the season. They haven't clicked at all this season, and they've been basically slogging through the season. I have a bet on Houston that I placed earlier in the season to win the division. I'm hoping Houston actually wins the division. I need Jacksonville to lose for that to happen. I don't think it's going to happen. But this could potentially be Cleveland versus Houston as well. And if Cleveland's playing against Houston, then I think they have an equally good opportunity of winning that matchup as well. So Cleveland, I think, has a very good shot of making it to the next round of the playoffs. And if you follow on Twitter, Spread and I talked about that team last week before last week's games, and we were very high on Cleveland. We were very high on the Rams, and Rams clinched, and Cleveland, is finally getting on people's radar. Oh, wait, maybe Cleveland's pretty good. And their ADP of these Cleveland players and the Rams players are shooting up. And Underdog's like draft account or something like that, like tweeted out all the ADP risers, and it was basically everyone that Spread and I discussed on last week's show. So, been on point with these so far, and hope to continue that with this show and the other shows that I have this week. All right, so moving on to the, moving on to the NFC. Green Bay versus Dallas is going to be an interesting matchup. This is a projection. Green Bay obviously hasn't locked it in yet. I'm projecting Green Bay to get that 7th seed and face off against Dallas. I think this would be an interesting matchup. Green Bay has a really good offense, and people have underestimated Jordan Love throughout the season, myself included, and he's proven everybody wrong. He's proven everybody he's legit. He is the quarterback of the future for Green Bay, and he played really well this season, and did a great job with getting the team to a point in the season where they have an opportunity to play for the playoffs, and they did it without Christian Watson for the most part. So Jordan Love has done it without Christian Watson, without Aaron Jones. It's all Jordan Love, basically. You got to give the guy credit. So he has a difficult matchup against Dallas, but Dak doesn't exactly have the best matchup against Green Bay. But there is one glaring spot that stands out in a weakness in Green Bay's defense, and that is against slot receivers, where they're allowing 26 DraftKings points a game to the slot receiver. And guess who runs 59% of his routes from the slot is CeeDee Lamb. So the best player on Dallas has the best matchup in this game. And that sets up Dallas to be able to exploit Green Bay's defense and pull out the win, especially playing at home, playing with a team that has a lot of momentum, and playing with a team that's has playoff experience. I would give the edge to Dallas, although I would love to see Green Bay pull off the win in this matchup. With the Rams versus Detroit, I think that this is another game where I would give the playoff edge to the Rams. I like the matchup for the Rams. The Rams have a good matchup. Detroit has an equally good matchup. There are some weaknesses in that Detroit defense, though, that the Rams can exploit because the Detroit defense is weak against the slot receivers again. And Cooper Kupp, 60% of his routes from the slot. Puka Nacua also runs 30% of his routes from the slot. So it's an area that the Rams are equipped to exploit. Both teams are among the best defenses in the league versus the run. So the run games are pretty much neutralized between the Rams and the Lions. And the Lions have a bad slot matchup because the Rams are only allowing 18.6 DraftKings points a game to the slot. And that would put Amon-Ra St. Brown in a bad matchup, which isn't good for the Lions defense, although Amon-Ra is pretty much matchup proof, but it is a weak spot for their offense in this matchup. And the wideouts of Detroit, though, are getting 25.3 DraftKings points a game from the Rams defense, which is a huge, huge number. It's probably like one of the most in the league that the Rams are allowing to the wideouts. So that would set up Detroit to throw the ball deep. And Jameson Williams is very interesting in a matchup like that. And we've seen him getting a lot more targets recently. And I would not be surprised if Jameson Williams is one of those guys in round one, at least, of the playoffs, that is that random guy that's going to get people to the second round. Jameson Williams, keep him in mind. And so generally this matchup, about equal, pretty much equal, but I would give the edge to the Rams just based on experience and, like somewhat of a coaching edge. And, I don't necessarily like to write off Dan Campbell, but I do think that, given the experience, that I have to give the edge to the Rams. And I would pick the Rams to upset Detroit in this matchup and advance to the next round. Although, it could go either way. So, maybe I draft, 70-30 in favor of the Rams or something like that. Still get exposure to Detroit because it's a pretty equal matchup. But, just keep in mind that the Rams, could come up with a good game plan to take this game. So the final game that we look at is the Philadelphia Eagles at the Tampa Bay Bucks. And this is what I was talking about in the last show. Like the Eagles, I thought we were going to be playing the Rams. That's what I was originally projecting. And they got, by losing that game and getting knocked into the number 5 seed, they've set themselves up to have a much easier matchup against Tampa Bay, because I think that Tampa Bay is obviously a much weaker opponent than the Rams. And if it's not Tampa Bay, it's going to be the Falcons or it's going to be the Saints. So the Eagles have landed in a spot that is ideal for them to potentially advance to the next round. I would much rather have them playing the Bucks rather than the Rams if I wanted them to advance. And that is the spot that they've landed in. Relatively equal matchup. Again, we're talking about, playoff experience. Both teams have playoff experience. Obviously, Tampa Bay won a Super Bowl a couple years ago. But Philly, that was with Tom Brady. Philly was in the Super Bowl last year. So, they both have the experience. The coaching is different this year than it was in that Super Bowl run. They don't have Arians as the head coach. They don't have Tom Brady as their quarterback. And instead, they have Baker Mayfield, who's had a really good year. Comeback player of the year worthy, I'd say. But I don't think that they are going to beat Philly when Philly was a team that went on that run a few weeks ago where they beat a lot of really good teams, and they were looking like the team to beat in the NFC up until a few weeks ago when they went in their skid. They started losing games. They went through a brutal stretch where they beat a ton of great teams, and then they just hit a wall, and they've been losing basically ever since. So I think the Eagles have the potential to get it back together and take this first round from Tampa Bay. This is why I'm saying they need to get a big win against New York, and by big win, not beating New York, that's expected, but beating them like senseless, just having a monster game against New York. They need to get their players' confidence. They need to get back in sync as a team. And I think that having a blowout win against the Giants in New York would do a lot towards making them more confident. I think that Devontae Smith is probably going to be out this week. He's got an ankle sprain, and we don't want them to push him before this round one of the playoffs. So if he does get to the round one of the playoffs, though, he's got a hell of a matchup because he was running 32% of his routes from the slot, and that is where the Bucs are giving up 27 DraftKings points a game. Devontae Smith, I've seen some people put him on their rankings like way, way low on the rankings. But I think that the key to Philadelphia versus Tampa Bay is going to be Devontae Smith, and it's going to be Dallas Goedert, because Tampa Bay is also giving up 16.1 DraftKings points a game to the tight end. Dallas Goedert, you can get him pretty late. And you can get Devontae Smith. He's getting later because people are concerned about that ankle. It's a mild sprain, they called it. So it's not a high ankle sprain or anything like that. It's a mild sprain. The running games are going to be neutralized in this matchup. Tampa Bay is only allowing 19 DraftKings points a game, and the Bucs are allowing 21 DraftKings points a game. And by the way, I know that the point scoring system is different, like with DraftKings and Underdog, but I just use DraftKings as a reference because that's how I have my setup here. But you get the same idea. You get the idea where the matchups are weak and where the matchups are strong. As far as quarterbacks, Tampa Bay is giving up 22 DraftKings points a game to quarterbacks, and Philly is giving up 23.6 DraftKings points a game to quarterbacks. So they are equal there, except Hurts has more upside than Baker Mayfield. So I don't hate Baker Mayfield as one of those late round quarterbacks to help you get through that first round if you have a bunch of San Francisco players, or if you have a quarterback on a bye in that first week. So Baker Mayfield is a good guy to help you get through that first round if you need with your bye week players. So keep that in mind with Baker Mayfield. The Eagles have been basically fail-proof with getting big games up to quarterbacks, and Baker Mayfield is super cheap. He can help you get through. The other team that I was referencing at the top is Houston. Houston is the team that, you can stack relatively late, and they have an opportunity against Buffalo to help you get through to that second round, because Houston has been a team that has been able to perform in bad matchups, and Buffalo's not a great matchup for them. It's not a great matchup for them at all. But we've seen with Buffalo, they've given up points in the past, and Houston is a team that can find a way to put up points against them. So you can get guys like Stroud, Nico Collins, Noah Brown, guys like that pretty late in these drafts. And if you're like me and you think that Houston can beat the Colts this week, then they're a good team to draft. If you think that the Colts can beat Houston, maybe you take a different path. You can draft some of these Colts guys because you got Jonathan Taylor, you got what's his face, Michael Pittman, Downs, guys like that. Like you could draft them super late. It's basically you're drafting these studs like super late, and you know that they're likely to, like, if they make it into the playoffs, only last one round in the playoffs, but they're worth drafting because they can help you get through your bye week players. You're sacrificing those spots in your roster, but a lot of people in those late rounds, they'll draft, like the fourth and fifth options on these teams that they think are going to make it to the Super Bowl. And that's fine and good, but you always see it. You always see it in playoff best ball. You always see one of these guys, like on a team that nobody's drafting, that is a stud receiver or running back or whatever it is. They end up popping off for a huge game. They get eliminated in the first round, but they help their teams advance to that second round. So keep that in mind when you're drafting. Like you're not necessarily, like, unless your team is very strong, you don't necessarily need to draft all those like secondary and thirdary like scrubs onto your team. It will help you if you get to the Super Bowl and you have a stacked team with like plenty of options going into that matchup, but it doesn't help you if you don't make it to the Super Bowl. So do it in moderation when you're drafting the scrubbier guys to try to get on your Super Bowl team. So that's it for these matchups. I think, like, in round 2, I'm looking at, based on the seeding, I would project Baltimore versus Miami. I would project Buffalo versus Cleveland. I would project San Francisco versus the Rams, and I would project Philly versus Dallas. Now, this round, like for Baltimore versus Miami, it's a relatively equal matchup from a defensive standpoint. Both of these teams have strong defenses. It's going to be a matter of which of the high-powered offenses can exploit the very good defense. So at that point, you got to give an edge to Lamar over Tua. Tua struggles under pressure. There's no run game back up there to help out, bail out Tua. This is not a matchup that I was hoping for. Hopefully, ideally, Miami would be the 2 seed. Pittsburgh would lose to Baltimore, and Buffalo would make it in as a 6 seed or whatever. That would be an idea. I would rather have Buffalo face Kansas City in round 1 than have Miami face Baltimore in round 2, because I want Buffalo and Miami to be able to advance as far as possible in these things. But the way that I'm projecting things right now, I'm going to have Baltimore versus Miami, and I'll probably lose Miami in that round because Baltimore is just overall going to have an edge in that matchup. And Beckham would be a guy, set up for success as far as a DVOA perspective, because, he has one of the better matchups for wide receivers that run a significant amount of their routes from the right side of the field. So Beckham would be set up for a decent matchup. He's going relatively late in these drafts. I don't know why people forget about Beckham or choose not to draft him, but Beckham is there for the taking, basically. With Buffalo facing Cleveland, that's a game where anything could potentially happen, and I think that Buffalo would take that game, but that's definitely a game where Cleveland could, pull an upset. This is me projecting that Buffalo is in the 2 spot, right? So this game isn't necessarily like a lock to happen or anything like that. This is just what I'm projecting. So If Buffalo faces off against Cleveland, I think that Buffalo ultimately wins that game. But I could definitely see Cleveland making a case for it. And that is why I'm drafting a decent amount of Cleveland lately, in addition to what Spread and I discussed last week about, Cleveland's being a sleeper in the playoffs, which it seems like the ADP is catching up to the sleepiness. San Francisco versus the Rams. This is a matchup that Shanahan always beats McVay, or seems to always beat McVay. McVay took one recently from San Francisco, but for the most part, we generally see Shanahan handle McVay in these matchups, and the 49ers typically will win these matchups. And Purdy would have a great matchup there, in addition to Debo and Ayuk. Debo and Ayuk would both have really good matchups. So both those guys are justified in their first, second round drafting, including Brock Purdy. So good matchup there. With the Rams, the wideouts would have a good matchup. So Puka Nacua would probably have the best matchup there, running about 56% of his routes as a wideout. So Puka Nacua, like when you're drafting those Rams, you can still get them in the middle rounds. I try to stack Cooper and Nacua because you never know which one of those guys is going to go off. So, I just try to get the full stack with the Rams. But I ultimately think San Francisco advances in that one. Not saying anything groundbreaking there. I think everybody's got San Francisco going through, but I'm looking at the matchup, and I think that San Francisco has a better matchup against the Rams. Philadelphia versus Dallas, divisional opponents. They split the series in the regular season. I think the home team won in each one of those games, and they'd be playing in Dallas this time. Dallas has the matchup edge. They have a good quarterback matchup in there, and they have a good slot matchup. So once again, CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb finds himself in one of the better matchups on the week, and sets himself up with 26.4 DraftKings points a game to slot receivers. CeeDee Lamb probably not going high enough in these drafts, even though he's going in the first round. He's set up to have 2 monster weeks back to back. If this plays out the way that I'm projecting it to play out, and I just like CeeDee Lamb. I probably want to be above the field on CeeDee Lamb, even though I don't think that Dallas is going to make it to the Super Bowl. But if you need a player that's going to get you through the first couple rounds, and you have an option between A.J. Brown and CeeDee Lamb, I'm taking CeeDee Lamb just based on where I'm projecting the first 2 weeks of matchups. I think Dallas is a team that chokes. I think that this is a spot where they choke. I think that Philadelphia can beat Dallas when Philadelphia is firing on all cylinders, but they are not firing on all cylinders right now. And I'm a little bit nervous about the team. I don't like the coaching. I don't like what I heard from the coaches. I believe they were talking about how they were running the ball multiple times this past weekend in spots where they should have been throwing, because as the offensive coordinator said, something along the lines of they like their offense in third down situations. So they were running the ball to get into third down situations because they like what the offense does on third down, which is like an absolutely horrible strategy for any offense to take. And if that's the philosophy, we're seeing exactly why the Eagles have been just struggling this year. And I was talking about it all season long about my concerns with the Eagles this year. And, hearing a comment like that just kind of helps me justify, like where my thinking was with concerns on the coaching of the Eagles this year. So Dallas, I would have advancing against San Francisco, and that matchup, they'd be playing in San Francisco. Dallas is going to choke at some point in this playoffs. They always do. Maybe they come through, maybe they pull it off. I just don't give the coaching edge to Mike McCarthy over Shanahan. I think as far as a matchup perspective, it's relatively even. I think Dallas has a matchup advantage in the wideouts. So, Brandon Cooks and Michael Gallup, and then CeeDee Lamb when he's running, when he's running those deep routes, would have advantages over San Francisco that could be exploited. But we've seen Dallas versus San Francisco. I think San Francisco like destroyed Dallas, if I remember right. If I remember right, I think they did. Like, I don't quote me on that. But the tight end position on Dallas has an edge on the San Francisco defense as well. That sets up Ferguson, and like a lot of edges on the defense matchup for favor of the Cowboys. But I just think like from a historic perspective, Dallas would be on the road. They'd be playing against like a negative coaching edge, and just overall, it's just a bad scene for Dallas in this matchup. I think San Francisco takes this one, so I would see San Francisco, and we have Buffalo versus Baltimore. I think that with the playoff experience edge that Buffalo, they've had it taken from them too many times. And I just think that this is the year that, Buffalo's faced enough adversity where if they make it into this playoffs, they're not going to take it for granted. I think that Buffalo handles Baltimore in a surprise win, and they advance to the playoffs as well. And then we got San Francisco versus Buffalo in the Super Bowl. I would love to see Miami make it to the Super Bowl, but I just think that the loss of Bradley Chubb is going to be a huge blow, and I don't have a whole lot of confidence that Miami can make it beyond Baltimore this season. But I got enough exposure to Miami so that if it does happen, then I'll be happy about it. But I got to shift gears and start drafting a lot more Ravens right now than I have been, because I wasn't expecting them to make it to the Super Bowl. But now I think that they're probably the best, one of the better AFC teams. But I'd like Buffalo to be able to use this year as the year that they face the adversity. They've had the playoffs almost taken away from them, and they end up overcoming it, and they end up making it to the Super Bowl and facing off against San Francisco. And in that matchup, I think that we'd be looking at a shootout between San Francisco and Buffalo, even though they both have good defenses. I think that, Steph Diggs would be able to exploit that weak spot in the wide receivers for San Francisco. And I think that San Francisco would be able to, their offense is just matchup proof. I think they'd be able to exploit Buffalo's defense, even though Buffalo's defense is really good. They lost one of their key linebackers, and San Francisco, with all the yak that they have, it just like San Francisco would be able to overcome that defense. And I think that San Francisco ultimately takes the Super Bowl this year. So that's kind of what I'm projecting this season, as far as making the run through the playoffs. And I'm going to get into an underdog draft here, where we can kind of draft with that in mind. But before I do that, make sure to hit the like button on this video. Like I was talking about earlier, make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel and help me out there. I'm trying to get up to 400 for now, but ultimately I want to get 500 YouTube subscribers before the end of the playoffs. And make sure to sign up for an Underdog account using the promo code SEEK. I'm setting up my draft right now. I'm gonna get into a mitten today. No, I'm gonna get into a gauntlet. Let me set this up real quick and get in here. Got to go to the 2023 playoffs and join. Oh, they got a little gauntlet. They got the regular gauntlet. The mitten 2 filled anyways, so I can't join that one even if I wanted to. So let me set this up. Let's see, active. I'm going to jump in there, share my screen. All right. So I haven't updated my projections yet to reflect where I'm thinking with this playoff scenario and how I'm envisioning it playing out. But use the promo code SEEK, SEEK, and they will match you up to $100 on your first deposit. So you're going to want to do that. And on top of that, I will send you my playoff rankings. If you hit me up on Twitter at Pumacom, my DMs are open. Hit me up. Let me know that you signed up for them, and I will send you my rankings. And we'll hopefully advance through these playoffs together. And I want to see some heat seeker watchers do well in these playoffs this year, and just show us, give us a good showing here. All right, guys. So we are good. So the draft is starting in 30 seconds. I am pick 4. So in that spot, I would anticipate Hill, Debo, or Lamb to fall to me. It's kind of been, like back and forth over which of those players is making it. I don't mind any of those players. Like, I like Lamb. Like I said, I think Lamb has the best matchups throughout the playoffs based on what I'm projecting, and I want to bump up my exposure to him. I don't think that he's necessarily making it to the Super Bowl, but I do like, where he's at, as far as my projections for him. So Christian McCaffrey, he's going number 1 in general for the most part. I don't think I've ever seen anyone take a different player number 1. Debo going number 2. That's happening more frequently now. And there goes Lamb, leaves me with Tyreek Hill. Hopefully the Dolphins can make it past Baltimore in those playoffs. I'll take my chances. Lamar Jackson is another guy that I could have drafted right there, and probably should have drafted, honestly, because I got enough Tyreek exposure, but I didn't really think there. I should have drafted Lamar Jackson, but we'll take Tyreek and run with that. Looking at Brandon Ayuk as my next option. He's ADP of 7. He just got taken. So that's going to leave me in a spot where I got to kind of decide if I want Brock Purdy. I want to get an NFC team here because my next highest picks are Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs in my rankings. So I'm going to go with Purdy here and lock in Purdy as my quarterback. I did the same thing yesterday. I ended up with 3 quarterbacks, which was stupid, but got Purdy. And this time I'm gonna just wait until late rounds until I make my next quarterback draft. So for now, though, I'm just gonna stick with Brock Purdy and ride him late into this draft and just load up on weapons. I'm gonna look at George Kittle. Well, he just got drafted. I'm gonna look at Jalen Waddle just to shore up my Miami guys. Actually, I'm sorry. I'm going to draft Mostert as my next guy. So I'll let him come to me. I think one of the teams that I'll be looking at to draft late will be the got Mostert here. Will be the Browns. I'm going to draft the Browns as a secondary team that could potentially make a run through these playoffs. If somehow we got the Browns versus San Francisco, that would be huge for this team because I don't think there's going to be a lot of people. Well, there might be now, but I don't think that a lot of people up to this point have been stacking, the Browns too much like we have. So we're coming up on my next pick where I'm loading up on Waddle for my next pick here. One thing that sucks with drafting San Francisco is usually it's tough to get more than one guy. That's why I'm wishing I had taken Lamar Jackson in that first round because it's a lot easier to stack the Ravens than it is to stack the Rams. And I think stack the 49ers. I think they have an equal chance of making it into the playoffs. So right now, I got Tyreek, Purdy, Raheem Mostert, and Jalen Waddle. I'm hoping for a Miami-San Francisco Super Bowl. That would set me up with basically all my components. I got the quarterback, I got the running back, I got the two wide out / tight ends, and I just need one flex guy. And as far as the flex, that's going to be tough because there's really no one else left on Miami except for A-Chain, and there's nobody left in San Francisco worth drafting. So I'm probably going to take A-Chain on my next pick, just so I make sure I have a full team going into the Super Bowl. And then at that point, I got to start looking at these Browns. The Browns, first guy off the board is going to be Amari Cooper. He's going at ADP of 30. So he just got taken. So I got to kind of shift my gears here. See, they're getting drafted earlier now, which makes it more difficult. So I'm going to take A-Chain here. So I got my Super Bowl team intact. I got my quarterback, my two wideouts, my running back, and my flex. So my flex is going to be A-Chain. So I am looking at, potentially Dak Prescott. I mean, Dak Prescott is going much later than would be expected. So, I don't mind taking Prescott here as my backup quarterback. That'll get me through round 1. And I'm going to look at Brandon Cooks as my next guy. Get me a Dallas guy on my team and a guy with that matchup against San Francisco in that second or third round that was really good. So I don't mind taking Dak and getting a Dallas guy in there because if Dallas somehow advances to the Super Bowl, then I would also have that full team intact with Dallas versus Miami. So let's get Cooks in there, and that'll shore that up. Ah, damn it. He just got taken. So Ferguson is the next guy up for me. I'll take Ferguson. So I still got a Dallas team intact. I got Dak, Ferguson, and then I'd have, if it was Dallas, Miami, I'd have Raheem Mostert, Devin A-Chain, Tyreek Hill, and Jalen Waddle. So I'm set up there. Coming up on my next pick, now I'm looking for upside. I'm going to be looking for some upside here. And I got Mike Evans, who, if they're playing the Eagles, Mike Evans has a fantastic matchup. So I like that. And here we go. We're running into the same situation I ran into yesterday where Tua was available like way late in the draft. And I don't want to get three quarterbacks. It just makes your team look so thin. But, like if he's around in like the final round, then I might consider Tua. But I don't want to get in that rut where I'm showing you guys me drafting 3 quarterbacks again. I don't want to do that. It's a bad example. So I'm going to try to fight that. But we'll see if Evans lands to me here. I've been getting sniped several times in this draft already. I have Beckham as a backup. Yep, there goes freaking Evans. So we got sniped right there. So now I am looking at. I don't want another running back. I have an option of taking Beckham here. He doesn't really fit my team, but I don't see a whole lot of better options. So I am just going to bite the bullet, and I'm going to draft Beckham here. As I was saying, I think he has a really good matchup a little bit later on. And maybe we get Dak, Beckham, Ferguson. That'd be, like almost we're 2 components short of a full team there. I need a running back. So maybe I look at Justice Hill. In that situation, I'll put him in my queue. As far as other players for Baltimore, we got Rashad Bateman. So I got Bateman and Hill as potential guys that I could draft. Tua still on the board. Round 9. I mean, if he makes it to round 10, then I'm going to have to set a bad example for you guys and draft a third quarterback. But right now, I only have 3 wide receivers / tight ends that are going to be available in round 1. So I got Beckham on a bye. So I really got to focus on drafting a guy that I think can do good in that first round. And the matchup for Jameson Williams, what was that matchup for Jameson Williams? Yeah, Jameson Williams has that really good matchup in the first round. So maybe I'll draft him and hope that he's that guy that goes off in the first round that can propel my team to the second round. So I'm taking Jameson Williams there. Looking at, I don't want to draft any Seattle guys. I was drafting a decent amount of DK Metcalf and Lockett, but after they lost to Pittsburgh this week, their playoff chances just tanked. So I'm trying to avoid them now, even though it looks like DK Metcalf would be, like a great pick. All right, so here we are with Tua in the final round. I basically have the entire Miami stack. I don't like drafting 3 quarterbacks, but, I'm just going to do it. I got Tua in the last round. So basically, I end up with, let's see. I'm sorry, guys. I was looking at my phone the whole time. Basically, I end up with Tyreek, Brock Purdy, Raheem Mostert, Jalen Waddle. No, let me go back to that. Brock Purdy, Tua, and Dak. You can see my quarterbacks. Not ideal. I don't like drafting 3 quarterbacks, but I've kind of been trapped into drafting Brock Purdy in the first round or second round these past two drafts that I've done with you guys. Ended up with Dak Prescott as my guy that I'm going to try to get the QB points from in the first round. I got a good value on him. Drafting him at pick 33 when his ADP is 25. I do think Dallas is going to make it at least to the second, if not third round of the playoffs. So not only does he get me through round 1, but he gives me upside for a couple more rounds of playoffs. I got Tua to shore up my Miami. If Miami goes off, then Tua should participate in that. I got that running game of Miami, which I like against Kansas City in week 1. And I got Tyreek and Waddle as well. I got Ferguson in round 1. I got Jameson Williams in that great matchup in round 1 that I'm projecting against the Rams, I believe. So Jameson Williams, I don't anticipate him making it beyond round 1, according to my projections. Round 2, I would be set up with Odell Beckham, Ferguson, And these two Miami guys, in addition to the Miami running backs and Tua and Dak and Purdy, I project all these guys making it to the second round, except for Jameson Williams. So overall, like not a great draft. Again, I keep getting trapped into these three quarterback builds these last couple times. So I'm going to do another draft, and hopefully we can avoid that in this next one here. But I just don't want to leave you guys with an impression of drafting three quarterbacks. So hang on a sec here. All right, I'm going to set up another draft here. I got to get out of this Miami drafting habit because I don't like their matchup as much as I did, but I got to adjust my rankings in order to kind of set me up to avoid that. I still like them, but I don't like them as much as I did. Let's just put it that way. I think that losing Bradley Chubb is just a huge blow for them, and I think that their potential matchup situation is a blow to them as well. But if they do end up winning against Buffalo, that sets them up as the number 2 seed. That significantly improves their matchup because I would project them to face maybe, potentially Houston in that first round, assuming that Buffalo gets that number 6 seed and they would be playing against Kansas City. But we need Pittsburgh to lose for that to happen. So it's like the fact that I'm even talking about Pittsburgh in these playoffs is just disgusting, but it's where we're at. So, I mean, if that's, like one way that you could get sneaky, like with your playoff drafting is to draft, Pickens and, some of those running backs from Pittsburgh. If you believe like in Pittsburgh, or if you want some, I don't even think it's upside in round 1 of the playoffs because Pittsburgh is just so bad. And it's just like it'd be such a just a pukey team to get into the playoffs, and it would just like ruin everything. But we'll see what happens with them. No offense to Pittsburgh fans, it's just like I think that you guys are probably thinking the same thing. You'd rather have a decent draft pick than have another shitty like playoff experience. All right, so Jackson went number 1 there. I'm going to take Christian McCaffrey. That's a no-brainer. Finally get a McCaffrey draft. I have horrible luck with getting that number 1 spot in these drafts. I don't know what it is, but I ended up with probably very minimal exposure to Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase in the playoffs, or I'm sorry, in the underdog regular season drafts, because I never get the first pick, which actually worked out in my favor because I had a ton of Amon-Ra St. Brown, but unfortunately I was drafting him, mainly pairing him with Garrett Wilson, thinking that Aaron Rodgers would be, the starting quarterback for the year. And then, of course, he gets hurt in that first week, and it just ruined everything. All right, so we're going into the second round here. Purdy goes off the board. Now, I have Christian McCaffrey, and my projected Super Bowl is the Bills versus the 49ers. Now, Tyreek is going super late here. You never see Tyreek going as pick 8, but it kind of shows you some of the fear that people are having right now with drafting him and the Miami in general. I don't know where that's coming from necessarily, because if they end up against Houston in that first round, that's a really easy matchup for them. And there goes Josh Allen. So I was hoping to be able to draft, like a stack with the Bills and the 49ers. But I got to kind of shift gears. I'm going to take Kittle here. I got to pick a different team to make it to the Super Bowl. for the AFC here. I got 2 49ers at least. Yeah, and I don't like any of these AFC teams, so I'm just going to go with Diggs. I can't even complete that stack, which sucks. So I'm going to have to try to pick an AFC team that I think can make it. I don't like Kansas City at all. Although, like I could have stacked them there and gotten some exposure to them and have a KC versus San Francisco build going, but yeah, I just don't think that they're going to make it far. So I got to kind of think of who I want to draft on the AFC side that I have a quarterback access to. The only teams are basically Kansas City, Miami, and Cleveland. So, I'm going to try again for Cleveland probably in this one. If Mahomes falls to me, I might just, bite the bullet and do a Chiefs stack because I could then get Pacheco. I'd have my quarterback and my running back set up. A. Morris would be my concern. Maybe he drafts Patrick Mahomes because he needs a quarterback too. He's probably thinking the same situation that I'm in. And some dude just drafted a second quarterback. So, there goes that plan. So it's coming back up on me. Somebody just took Cook. So I don't have a Bill stack. This is where it gets tricky because you gotta think on the fly when you're in these situations. Coming up on me, pick 23. And I got to get a running back. Let's see. I'm going to go with I'm just going to start stacking these Rams here. And I'm going to go for hang on a second. I'm going to get these I'm going to start my my Browns stack here. I'll go for a Browns versus San Francisco Super Bowl. Got Cooper. Going to target Njoku. He is going at about ADP of 40. Let's see. Let me scroll up for you guys. So I got right now, I'm looking at McCaffrey, Kittle, Diggs, Kyron Williams. Kyron Williams just, like he's a filler to have a stud running back to try to help me get through at least round 1, and hopefully he is there for me in round 2 as well. But I got Christian McCaffrey in round 2, but you have to draft a running back to go along with McCaffrey. Also got Diggs and Cooper in round 1, hoping for that cushy matchup for Amari Cooper versus Jacksonville. If they don't face Jacksonville, I got him against Houston. So he's got a good matchup either way, or Indy even. I think he's set up for a decent matchup no matter what. And I got Njoku on deck. He's been doing really well with Joe Flacco. I'm looking at Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. Those guys are super tempting, but for the sake of what I'm trying to do here with put a complete Super Bowl team together, I have to draft Njoku. Because otherwise he's not going to last. He's probably not going to last to my next round. Although he might. I'm going to go with Cooper Kupp. I can't pass up Kupp there. I'm going to go with Njoku on my next pick. He's at ADP of 39. This dude looks like he's stacking Baltimore. Hopefully he takes Beckham with his next pick. and leaves Njoku for me. I'm not going to draft Jerome Ford. I don't have a need for it because I'm going to have Christian McCaffrey by then. So right now I'm looking at Christian McCaffrey, Kyron Williams. I got George Kittle, Stephon Diggs, Amari Cooper, Cooper Kupp, David Njoku. I need a quarterback. Going to go with Flacco. So I have Flacco. He's going at ADP of 47. So I have to pick him up with my next pick. Otherwise, I'm screwed with no quarterback. So just a horrible, horrible situation. I'm hoping that Cleveland makes it to the Super Bowl in that situation. I'll probably take Stafford as a backup because I do have that exposure to the Rams in this lineup. And that way, if the Rams are able to pull it off against San Francisco, at least I have somewhat of this lineup salvaged to go into the Super Bowl, assuming that Cleveland makes it in there. But even if the Rams make it in there alone, I'll be able to, like field somewhat of a team there because I'll be able to grab Demarcus Robinson like in a later round. And Demarcus Robinson's shown a great chemistry with Matthew Stafford recently. But I do think that I need to adjust my rankings to get more of these high upside late round guys in my lineups because now that Cleveland is going much earlier, it's a lot more difficult to front load your team with these studs and then just backload it with the Browns. You have to basically take the Browns in those mid rounds now, which kind of messes up the flow of the draft. So I got Flacco there. So I got a full Brown stack. I think that can make it a couple rounds into the playoffs. I'm going to grab Stafford as a backup with my next pick. Actually, no, I'm grabbing Beckham. I'm going to grab Beckham because, well, no, I don't need to grab him now. So yeah, I'll go with Stafford. At least with Stafford, I have that insurance in case things go wrong with Flacco. I mean, this is a year where we've seen, like the elite quarterbacks kind of be neutralized. Unless you're like Lamar Jackson, all these other elite quarterbacks for the most part have been neutralized this year. So I think it makes sense to draft, like these later round quarterbacks. As long as you think they're going to make them, like relatively far in the playoffs, you should be good to go. And I do think that, like Stafford and Flacco are going to advance to the second round of the playoffs at least. So I think that I'm set up there, with at least two rounds of quarterbacks, and then I'm just hoping for like a miracle with one of those dudes, like advancing beyond that. But I would need for Stafford to beat San Francisco in order to advance, or I would need Flacco going on a bit of a run there. So Demarcus Robinson is still on the board. I got one pick left. He's shown that chemistry with Stafford. So if I end up getting him, the good thing is there's no one else really to draft with upside that I think has a realistic. Well, we got Ridley. I've been avoiding the Jags for the most part, just because I think they're a first round out. Although I don't hate drafting ETN like as one of those running backs to kind of cover up when you're drafting Christian McCaffrey. So basically, with my draft, we're looking at, get to it here in a second. Let's see. All right, so we're looking at Flacco, We're looking at Stafford. We're looking at McCaffrey and Kyron Williams. We're looking at Kittle, Diggs, Cooper, Kupp, Njoku, and Robinson. So basically, what I got here is I got a stack with Stafford, Kyron Williams, Cooper Kupp, and Demarcus Robinson. That is like a decent full stack on the uh, Rams side. If Stephon Diggs if the Bills end up making it to the playoffs or to the Super Bowl, then I have a full team there because I got my quarterback, my running back, my 2 wide receivers in Marcus Robinson and Cooper Kupp, and then I have my flex in Stephon Diggs. So Rams versus Buffalo, I'm covered there. If it ends up being Buffalo versus San Francisco, I would have McCaffrey, Kittle, Diggs, and that's it. So I have a very naked team in the Super Bowl. I was not able to get one of those quarterbacks, unfortunately, but that's just where I'm at with the Buffalo stack. If it was Cleveland that made it through to the Super Bowl, I would have Flacco, I would have McCaffrey, I would have Kittle, I would have Cooper, and I would have Njoku. So I'd be set up there. Ideally, if it's Cleveland versus the Rams, I got Flacco, Stafford, Kyron Williams, I got Cooper, I got Cooper Kupp, I got David Njoku. So that would be an ideal situation for this stack because I would have one, and I got Demarcus Robinson. I would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 guys. I would have 7 guys in that Super Bowl. I mean, that would be a team live to win that competition. Now, 2 years ago, when I was drafting, Cincinnati versus Cincinnati, full stacks. You were able to get full stacks of them the year that they made it to the Super Bowl because nobody was expecting them to make it to the Super Bowl. But I had them projected to make it to the Super Bowl because I had been high on Cincinnati all year, and they just had a swag to them that I liked, similar to what I see with Brock Purdy this year. And I just really liked the way that the team was clicking. I like the way that Jamar Chase was coming along, and I projected them to make it to the Super Bowl, which they did. I had them facing San Francisco, so I had mainly Cincinnati versus San Francisco stacks, but I did have a few Rams versus Cincinnati stacks too, and that set me up to be live in the Super Bowl because I had like teams with like 7 players. Because a lot of people try to jam in the favorites. So a lot of people are trying to jam in as much Ravens and as much 49ers as they can into the Super Bowl right now, into their lineups. I don't have complete faith in Baltimore, like making it to the Super Bowl. I'm a huge Lamar Jackson fan. There's been several years where I, kind of had him picked to win the MVP. Not this year, though. Like in the past, though, I kind of had him pegged as the MVP, and he would get hurt late in the season or whatever. So I just kind of, kind of gave up on betting that. And then this year, of course, he was healthy all year, and now he's the favorite for MVP. But, like in the playoffs, though, we have yet to see it in the playoffs. And, like if they're facing against the Bills, they got a really tough matchup there with the Bills' experience in the playoffs. They could face the Dolphins. We don't know who they're going to face. If they face even if they face the Browns, they're facing off against a division opponent. So even that's a difficult matchup. So we don't know what is going to happen with Baltimore in the playoffs, but they are the favorite. I would say, probably the favorite to win the Super Bowl right now. I haven't seen the odds recently, but I would guess they're the favorite to win the Super Bowl. The way that they handled San Francisco when they played, and the way that, like they're just firing on all cylinders. and they're looking like a dominant team, but they are, a potential out in the playoffs. We saw it a couple years ago when they got eliminated in the playoffs by Cincinnati, I believe it was. Then there was that year that Lamar was the MVP, and it looked like they were just going to roll through the playoffs, and then they ended up getting eliminated by the Titans. So anything can happen in the playoffs. If you get the right matchup, anything can happen. And with Baltimore, I think the matchups that would be the most interesting would be Baltimore versus Miami or Baltimore versus Buffalo, because I think those two matchups, and Baltimore versus Cincinnati for that matter, because all those matchups, the defenses on both sides are going to be really good defenses, and at that point, it's just going to be a matter of who gets the breaks in that game. And I just think that anything can happen in those games. We've seen Lamar choke in the past. Like he has a different offensive coordinator this year that has helped him out like big time with the offense this year. And it has worked. It has fired on all cylinders. They've allowed it to cater more to Lamar Jackson's strengths, and it has worked. But that's not to say that he can't have a slip up one week. And the playoffs would be a chance for that to happen. Lamar Jackson, he's also not the most durable guy. So if something were to happen to Lamar Jackson, then Baltimore would be, like prime for like losing a game. Who knows? Anything can happen in the playoffs. But if somehow Cleveland makes it to the playoffs, then this team that I just put together is pretty good and pretty set up. Like it'd have a Cleveland versus San Francisco set up, and it's got a Cleveland versus Rams set up. And I have both of San Francisco and the Rams making it to those semifinals at least, and then potentially to the conference championship. The Rams could potentially make it to the conference championship if they pass San Francisco, and then they'd be playing against Dallas. And Dallas, though that's a team that could choke any week in these playoffs. So I could easily see the Rams beating Dallas and making it to the Super Bowl and facing off against Cleveland potentially. But that's a situation. Gave you a little bit of insight into what I'm thinking when I'm drafting and like how I'm trying to adjust. Like I'm much happier with this second lineup that I drafted than I was with my first, even though I didn't get secured with a elite quarterback. Like I'm potentially got a quarterback in a decent matchup in round one at the very least. I think that both, Stafford and Flacco have good matchups in round one. Stafford is facing off against Detroit in my projections. If they face off against Detroit, then Detroit is allowing 22.5 DraftKings points a game to the quarterback position. And then with Cleveland facing Jacksonville, as I'm projecting, Jacksonville is allowing 22.6 DraftKings points a game to the quarterback position. So both those quarterbacks are set up with opportunity to score a lot of points in that first round and, continue that potentially into the second round because, San Francisco versus the Rams is what I'm projected in that second round, where San Francisco is giving up 17.8 DraftKings points a game to the quarterback, which is a middling matchup. And Buffalo is giving up 18.7 DraftKings points a game to the quarterback position, which is also a middling matchup. But if you look at the defenses in the second round that I have projected, that 17.8 and 18.7 points a game that the Buffalo and San Francisco defenses are giving up are basically the third and fourth highest amount of DraftKings points out of all those defenses that I'm projecting to make it into that round. So that sets up both Flacco and Stafford to have decent games in that round, and so on. So we'll see what happens, and make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Looking for that 400 subscribers, and make sure to hit like on the video. Help me get to 15 likes. I'll put out a shorter video a little bit later on, and maybe put out a few of these shorter videos just to kind of cover teams to target in these best ball drafts. And make sure to sign up for Underdog using the promo code SEEK. You got to take out their default promo code when you go to that sign up page and type in SEEK. I'll also have the link in the description of this video to make it easier for you guys. And hit me up if you do, because on your first deposit with a new account, they'll give you a 100% match up to $100. And hit me up when you do that, and I will send you my playoff best ball rankings. You hit me on Twitter at Pumacom, send me a DM on there, and I'll set you up. And until next time, I'll be doing a show with Spread tomorrow, and hopefully Bob Gomes on Thursday. So you should see a lot of these shows coming out from me, and I will see you guys next time.